Coming up, lots to talk about this week, and Debbie and I will do our Friday roundup. We're going to talk about Camelot. This is the effort to turn Kamala Harris into Camelot. And also about some of the latest revelations about the Trump assassination attempt, and also Maduro and the 2024 election. Hey, if you're watching on Rumble or listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
Debbie and I are here for our Friday roundup, and boy, there's a lot that's happened this week, a lot to talk about in the sphere of politics. But I thought we'd say a word about your mom's funeral, which was last weekend, and just a beautiful ceremony. And I was very honored and pleased to do the tribute. And you had to warn me a little bit not to go too crazy, and I think I obliged. But the point I wanted to make about your mom and stress in the tribute was just that she was an ordinary person who lived a very extraordinary life. And I made the point that, by the standards of the world, people would say, well, she wasn't famous, she wasn't rich, she wasn't successful in that sense. And I made the point that she had a very successful life.
Yeah, you're
she was
make
kind
me
of
cry.
She was like really good at life. She taught a whole generation of students. She was a really good mom to you and your brother, AJ. And she had innumerable friends. She made friends everywhere she went.
Yeah.
So as a result, she's left. I mean, just think of all the people who were there and how affectionately they spoke about your mom. So anyway, I'm not. Mourning is going to take a while. It doesn't go away right away.
Every once in a while I break down, and I'm good for most of the day.
Yeah.
But then I just.
Well, when we were coming to the podcast on a daily basis, you would call your mom. And I would sometimes just be eavesdropping, or I would drop in with like a joke or a quip. But it was actually, you had a very good rapport with her on a daily basis. And honestly, that's something you're going to miss, right? Because it's in your muscle memory. And you probably are like, I'm ready to call my mom.
Yeah.
Well, where's my mom?
Yes. And the other thing that I've been doing a lot, and I don't know if this is part of the healing. I'm sure it is. I didn't have this with my dad. I had one recording of my dad that I listened to a lot after he passed away. And even that got a little easier with time. And with my mom, I have all her voicemails. I also have her phone. So I sometimes will call it to listen to her recorded message.
Yeah.
Hi, I can't come to the phone. And my mom kept going on, and then it cut off, because my mother loved to do that.
Right.
She would leave messages on my phone that were like 5 minutes long, and it would finally cut off, or, several minutes long, and it would finally cut off. And that was just my mom. She didn't understand technology. And it was the same way with Facebook. How she would leave messages on Facebook thinking that it was just us reading the message, when she'd go on your Facebook page and she would write things that is not really
not for public consumption per se. You're like, Mom, this is Dinesh's public page.
I go, Mom, 4 million people can see this. Please, no, take it down. I can't delete it, Mom. Please, So, but anyway, my mom was a sweetheart, and I tell you, she was 88, and that is a very long life. But for me, not long enough.
Well, you made a point about your dad. You lost your dad when you were 17. And so, in a sense, you were raised by a single parent in a double sense. Your mom brought you to America. And so from the age of 10, you had only your mom. Your dad was alive, but not present, not there on site. And then your dad died 7 years later. So you've had your mom your full life. And she's been your rock. right? And so it is tough. All right, let's talk about politics, and I don't think you've had a chance on the podcast to react to the emergence of Kamala Harris and what we're calling in our description Camelot. In fact, we didn't come up with this. I wish we had. It's very clever. It's the effort to romanticize Kamala Harris. It's an effort to create Kamalot. This was actually the title. I don't know if it's New York Magazine or one of those propaganda outlets. And they, what's funny is on the cover of the magazine, they have Obama, they have Schumer, and all these people are like giving a cheer or they're doing a high five. It's so unnatural. And I think that summarizes the way in which they're trying to manufacture this spontaneous wellspring of feeling for her. It's not really there, but the media is like, we think we can fake it. We think that the American people are stupid enough that if we give them enough images of people jumping up and down, they'll go, wow, everyone must be so excited about Kamala Harris.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what the intellect of the majority of the American people is, and I don't know if they're going to be stupid enough to believe that this woman is now actually something great.
Other than we've known her to be.
Other than a dimwit, other than she's been really absent and absent-minded this entire time.
Right.
Not to mention she was complicit in the whole, hiding that Biden was senile. And not able to carry on his position as president, right?
I mean, not to mention that she was his point person for the border.
Yeah.
In other words,
she was named border czar, right?
Right.
And then now, I don't know if you noticed, they're trying to take that away. Like, we never said she was border czar. She was never over the border. They're trying to literally make you think that they didn't do that.
So this is the way they operate. And so it's important to diagnose, for example, how a fact checker will handle this. So if I'm a leftist fact checker, this is how I deal with it. I say, the right is falsely labeling Kamala Harris, quote, border czar. Now, I will have to admit in the text of the article that Biden did in fact name her as his point person on the border. But perhaps he didn't use the actual phrase border czar. And therefore, the fact that the right is calling her a border czar, we rate this false. This is how these fact checkers are. In other words, this is how they take something that is true and they make it false. Mm-hmm. And this is how they erase history. In fact, with Axios, it was even so blatant because they realized that they themselves had used the phrase border czar to refer to her 3 years earlier. So they went back and stealth edited their old articles to remove the references to border czar, and so that they could now say, because they knew that somebody's going to go, oh, well, guess what? You yourself called her the border czar. So they're like, we got to go change that so nobody can dredge it up. So this is the
shocking.
Orwellian. I know we are onto these guys, and so it's not shocking to us, but it is shocking. I mean, at a certain naive level, the idea that you could have a free press that has become essentially a Goebbels operation.
Honey, first of all, it's not a free press. I mean, really, these people are the other arm of this regime,
and they see themselves that way.
Unlike Venezuela, where the regime forces the media to tout what they want, this regime doesn't have to.
Right.
They're hand in hand.
I mean, it's so true that I mentioned Goebbels, and under Goebbels, the propaganda ministry would issue an edict. You have to do this. This is opposition. Everybody has to go along, otherwise we'll arrest you. In America, they don't have to do that.
No.
And they don't have to even get everybody on a Zoom call because these are willing apparatchiks who, if you told them, you need to report tomorrow morning that the sun doesn't rise in the east, it rises in the west, some obliging troop of fact checkers would be like, you know what? And they would do the most unbelievable gymnastics. They would say things like, well, not only does the sun not rise in the east, the sun doesn't really rise at all. Mm-hmm. Because after all, it is the earth that goes around the sun and not the sun that goes around the earth. So we can't speak of the sun rising because it's the earth that... So in other words, they will do every intellectual gymnastic to ultimately get people to believe a falsehood. That's the business they're in now.
Yeah. And do you think, I mean, look, I know that the far left and the left, they do rally around whoever their candidate is. I mean, they even rallied around Biden for a little while until they couldn't anymore because it was obvious, right? But do you really think the middle of the road American is going to not only be okay with the fact that for 3 years their party lied to us about the state of the mental capacity of the president, but now all of a sudden they're putting this woman who is famous for her what do they call her what do you call it? What she does, her word salads
oh my gosh,
and things like that. Do you really think that they are going to now turn this woman into like an intellectual like goddess? I mean, I
don't think it's going to work because it's actually very similar to what happened with Biden. Remember that in the weeks leading up to Biden's withdrawal from the race, there was a massive effort to not only prop him up, but claim that he's actually a genius.
Yep.
You remember Morning Joe? He's like, I talk on a regular basis to Biden, and Biden is getting smarter. He goes, this Biden we have now, in other words, comatose, totally gone, sitting in the canoe looking around Biden. He goes, that's the best Biden ever. That's his quote. Best Biden ever. Better than we've ever seen him before. So they reach a certain level of nonsense.
Yeah.
And then they realize the propaganda is not selling.
Yeah,
that's when they have to. But with Kamala, they're not going to be able to backpedal, I don't think, at this point. They're going into the final lap. So let's take a pause. We'll be back to talk more about Kamalot. In these crazy times, we all want peace of mind and security for our country, for our leaders, for our families. But hey, we also need financial security. And think about this, you're not financially secure if all your eggs are in one basket. Gold and silver, by the way, are an excellent way to diversify your savings. They can be a hedge against inflation. They're a physical asset that's in high demand globally, from the wealthy to central banks. And through my friends at Birch Gold Group, you can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account. That's right, you can diversify an old IRA or 401k for no money out of pocket into an IRA in gold and silver. This is one thing you can do to secure your family's savings. So text Dinesh to 989898. Get your free, no obligation information kit. Learn about the role that precious metals can play in your overall savings strategy. Again, text Dinesh to 989898. With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, thousands of happy customers, you can trust Birch Gold like Debbie and I do. Text Dinesh to 989898. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollar as well? Introducing Share Right. Share, R-I-G-H-T. It's healthcare done the right way. At Share Right, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community. Forget about paying excessive premiums. With Share Right, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. So think about what you could do with all those savings. But it's more than just savings. Share Right ensures you have access to the care you deserve precisely when you need it, from routine checkups to unexpected emergencies. With Share Right, your healthcare is their top priority. So empower yourself today by taking control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh to learn more. See how much you can save. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh. That's shareright.org/Dinesh for healthcare done the right way. I'm back with Debbie. We're talking about Kamalot, Kamala Harris, and we got to react to this encounter between Trump and these black journalists, specifically a female journalist who begins to attack Trump, and the issue of Kamala Harris comes up. And here I think Trump goes where no other Republican would go, because most other Republicans...
Except you.
I mean, no Republican running for president. I would not only go there. I have already gone there, and I've gone there actually at a level that even I don't think Trump is fully aware of, which is pretty funny, and we can talk about it in a moment. But here's what Trump said. He basically goes, "Wait a minute, this woman was being trumpeted for a long time as being like the first, Asian Indian to be, a senator in America. There were profiles of her in Indian magazines. She was claiming to be Indian. If you look at this photo with her family, they're all in saris. And he goes, like, when did she become black? He goes, suddenly she's black. Now, the left's answer to that is going to be, well, her dad is from Jamaica. But the problem with that is that's based on the assumption. You think, oh, well, her dad is some kind of Rastafarian. He's some Jamaican guy, man. No. Her father is a very cultivated, light-skinned Jamaican man who is descended from the guy who is arguably the largest white slave owner in Jamaica. So in other words, this guy does have some black lineage, but not a lot. I mean, I would not be totally surprised if Kamala Harris had the same percentage of black as you do, namely 10%.
Yeah.
I'd like to see her ancestry or her 23andMe.
Yeah.
Because and in fact, at one point, this came up because Kamala Harris was asked something like, have you ever smoked pot? Right? Mm-hmm. Here's what Kamala Harris goes. She goes, I'm from a Jamaican family, man. She's trying to act like some kind of, that this was some sort of, and her father issued a public statement, and he goes, and he has a little bit of he was a professor, by the way, and he has a little bit of a sort of a clipped English accent. He goes, I wish to divest myself from this sort of lunacy. In other words, what he's trying to say is, this woman is making slanders on our family. We are not some sort of a weed smoking, Rastafarian operation. Not at all. That's not how we see ourselves. And in fact, Laura Loomer just released Kamala Harris's birth certificate. Race, Caucasian.
No way.
Oh, yeah. Caucasian.
No way.
And there's a reference to her Indian ancestry. Of course, Indian Americans are Caucasian racially, so we shouldn't confuse race and skin color. Yeah. So anyway, this has all come in, but I thought two things are interesting. One is this sort of remaking of Kamala Harris, because the black journalist said, well, she identifies as black. And I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, I'm Asian Indian. If I identify as black, do I become black? It's the same issue that we raise when we're talking about the trans.
Well, and
identifying doesn't make you something.
Yeah. And she, to be honest, these politicians, especially Democrats, will identify with whoever they think their base is.
Right.
So if they think their base is black, they identify as black. If they think their base is Latino, they'll identify as Latino or act Latino. You remember when Obama used to go in front of the Latinos, he'd start speaking like he was Latino.
She's doing that already.
Oh,
Kamala Harris has already started her routines, and you can see it. She puts on the Southern drawl. It's again, like you say,
so ridiculous.
You wonder whether these audiences are not alert to this kind of thing. I mean, I do not believe that the ordinary person is that stupid, and here's why I say that. Honey, think about it this way. You take the ordinary American and you put them in a movie, watching a movie, right, in the audience. Movies will often convey information through just the raising of an eyebrow, through a glance. And people are very smart about picking up when someone is being cagey, someone is lying. Oh, I think that's the real killer, not the obvious suspect. People are actually very shrewd about being able to make these kinds of deductions, not about sort of abstract intellectual matters, but about human matters. And that's why I say to myself, they're going to be able to see through this. This is a massive charade.
But they didn't see through Obama.
But Obama was...
They didn't even see through Biden. Well, I think they did.
They did.
They did. It was like a little...
Yeah, and with Obama, you have to admit, you were dealing with...
a snake.
You were dealing with a supreme, shrewd, cunning... Obama's rhetoric was not far left-wing. No. He sounded like someone who was, really cogitating and deliberating on the issues. And I think people felt that this is the guy that you could talk. I mean, think of it. There were conservatives at Harvard Law School who voted for Obama to be the president of the Law Review because he convinced them that he was the one guy, unlike the other liberals, who would listen to them and hear them out. So they knew this was a contest among liberals, but they chose him as their favorite liberal, not realizing They were basically going for Barack Lucifer Obama.
Yeah.
They had no idea.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
Well, I saw right through him, and only because, look, when, you know, when we'll talk about Venezuela a little bit later, but the rhetoric was identical to Hugo Chavez's rhetoric, because, as you know, he came in also acting like he was middle of the road.
yeah, and he fooled a lot of people, including your grandparents.
Exactly. So, you know, he didn't fool me, and this woman certainly doesn't fool me either. And let's hope that she doesn't fool the rest of America, because this is really, really bad. But so let's talk about the Secret Service.
Let's talk about So the acting director testified this past week, and I thought it was just a horrible evasion of responsibility. Basically, here's what he said. Lots of mistakes were made. Now, whenever someone says lots of mistakes were made in the passive voice, I'm on my guard. Because what you're really saying, instead of saying, I made a mistake, or the deputy director made a mistake, you say mistakes were made.
Mm-hmm.
So he said lots of people fell short, but he said no one would be disciplined or fired. So in other words, what these guys do, whenever they're called to the carpet, they say, oh, we are part of a secret agency. Check out our name, Secret Service. Therefore, we're going to keep our secrets. We're not really going to tell you what actually happened. And in fact, I talked earlier in the week about how they've been putting out this sort of clearly false narrative that this guy, Thomas Crooks, was some kind of a right-winger. And as I pointed out, this is not the case. From what we know, the guy was pro-Biden. He was anti-Trump. He was basically against Trump's border policies. This is what was motivating him. I mean, you don't need to be a genius to figure out he hated Trump, right? Because there's a reason he was trying to assassinate Trump. Mm-hmm. And so you have to start there. What is it about Trump that made him target Trump? He didn't go after anyone else. So, but the FBI, I think, not the FBI, the Secret Service is engaged in a sort of a camouflage operation on this with regard to the guy's motives. They would love to show he was some sort of a disturbed right-winger, because then they'll argue, well, Trump himself has created the toxic atmosphere that produced a guy. So in other words, blame Trump for the assassination attempt on Trump.
Yeah.
That's what they're going for.
Yeah. So it's interesting because, you know, I guess it has to be at the top level of the Secret Service because, as you know, the agents, I think, are right-wing. I think
at
they are.
At least some of them.
You know, when we were in Mar-a-Lago a week or so ago, as we come in, and he has Secret Service everywhere, they all greeted you. Hi, Mr. D'Souza. They all know who you are, and they're very friendly. One of them was chatting with me, and, you know, all of those things. So I don't know. I think it must be really difficult for these guys that actually, you know, our Secret Service to him, his detail, if they are loyal and if they are right-wing, to take orders from an otherwise not right-wing.
I think that must have happened in the FBI and the CIA. In other words, the corruption of these agencies at the top must have been difficult for patriots who work in those agencies at the lower or all the way down. And look, I mean, you know, we've been critical. I've been critical of the Secret Service, and obviously I've been sharing memes about the female agents who are too short, or they're fumbling for putting the gun in the holster, or they're pretending to do something, or they really don't know what's going on. But there were several agents who were right on top of Trump immediately, and that shows that those guys were absolutely willing to take a bullet that was aimed at Trump. And these are the guys who knocked Trump out of his shoes. So we have to commend those guys, the heroic people who are willing to do that. Yeah,
it's really too bad that the agency itself cannot keep, you know, I don't know if it's politics or whatnot, but the fact that they kind of go on the cheap when it comes to Trump's detail tells me a lot. Because do they do that with Obama? Let's say Obama does a rally. Are they like shortchanging him?
Oh, let's move some of his Secret Service to Jill Biden.
Yeah.
Probably not. Yeah. So what that means is that, and this is the way in which I think the White House has corrupted the agencies of government even from doing their job. In other words, they corrupt the military, they corrupt the Secret Service, they certainly corrupted the DOJ. But it goes beyond the DOJ. They've corrupted DHS, the Homeland Security Department. So there have always been traditional functions that these agencies do that are not subject to the whims of partisan politics. But I think what Biden and Harris have done is they have politicized even those functions. So it's like, well, why are we giving all this security to Trump? He's not our friend. He's not on our side. That kind of thinking. So, it used to be, we would never dream of thinking in the Reagan or Carter era that, for example, the Secret Service would be more protective of Reagan or more protective of Carter. It never crossed our mind. We're like, that's the Secret Service's job. Yeah. But now I think we have to think that way because that is the reality of the situation. You asked and MyPillow listened. They're finally bringing you the most requested offer ever. Right now, you can get the queen-size premium MyPillow for only $19.98. Wow. MyPillow is made with patented adjustable fill. It adjusts to your exact individual needs regardless of your sleep position. It helps keep your neck aligned, holds its shape all night long, so you get the best sleep of your life. But that's not all. You can get the 6-piece kitchen or bath towel set for just $25. The brand new mattress topper for as low as $69.98, and the famous MyPillow bed sheets for as low as $25, and so much more. So call 800-876-0227, the number again, 800-876-0227, or go to MyPillow.com. When you use promo code Dinesh, you get huge discounts on all the MyPillow products, including the premium queen-size MyPillow, for only $19.98. That's the lowest price ever, so don't delay. Order today. Go to MyPillow.com and use promo code Dinesh. Big election year this year, big movie coming out I'd like to invite you to check out and consider joining my Locals channel. I post a lot of exclusive content there, including content that is censored on other social media platforms. On Locals, you get Dinesh Unchained, Dinesh Uncensored. You can also interact with me directly. I do a live weekly Q&A every Tuesday. No topic is off limits. I've also uploaded some cool films to Locals, documentaries and feature films, both mine and also films by other independent producers. 2000 Mules is up there, Police State is up there, and the new film coming out this fall will be up there as well. If you're an annual subscriber, you can stream and watch the content for free. The movie content, it's included with your subscription. So check out the channel. It's dinesh.locals.com. I'd love to have you along for this great ride. Again, it's dinesh.locals.com. Debbie and I have one more segment together for today, and I thought I would ask, honey, your opinion on Venezuela, because not only have you been following all of this, but you're getting now all these media requests. You're going to do one on Saturday, and I'm sure others will come in to look at this, I think from your point of view, utterly predictable election. I mean, you could see before the election, there was a lot of false hope. People are like, okay, well, this time we're going to get him. We're going to get Maduro. The tide is turning against him, popular sentiment. And I think the point that you want to make, and I want you to develop it, is at some point, popular sentiment doesn't matter at all.
Well, look, I think I have severe PTSD when it comes to Venezuela, the elections, and even somewhat the American elections. Yes, I've been following Venezuelan elections for the last 25 years. I've been on this for forever, really. From the very first time that Hugo Chavez was recalled in 2004, okay, when Maria Corina, she wasn't anybody really then. She went after Hugo Chavez. Because all of the things that he campaigned on, he did not do. In fact, he even said that, look, if after 5 years I'm not doing my job, recall me.
Yeah, so let's back up just so people understand what's happening. Hugo Chavez comes in the late 1990s.
1999, yes.
And I think you even said that his original election, he won.
Right.
He came in as a third-party guy, and he basically said the other parties are all corrupt.
Right.
And I'm going to come in and straighten the place out.
Right. So the left party backed him. So it wasn't a third party. It was really, he was running on the party. He was running on a different party, but the left backed him. So really, Acción Democrática
He was their guy. Yeah.
Right. And then the Copé and all the other parties that kind of dismantled weren't able to keep it together. I mean, they really self-destructed.
So he comes in, he makes these promises, like you say. He says he's not a socialist, he's not a communist, and he says, I will attract businesses.
Yes.
Now, he doesn't do any of those things, and so in 2004, a popular...
not only that, but he starts
expropriating property and land.
And he starts taking it away, and people are like, what is this guy? Not only that, he goes into his anti-Semitism, which nobody even knew he had, and then he starts, like, praising Hitler and all these other things. And he starts talking about how the white settlers, so all of this, anti-colonialism all of a sudden starts.
We'll talk about the 2004 election, because in a way it is such a mirror of what happened now. What happened in 2004, and compare it to what happened a few days ago.
Right. So as I said, he had said that if he wasn't doing his job and if he was doing a terrible job, people could recall him. So they did in 2004. And exit polls, people were excited about it because they're like, okay, we're finally going to get rid of this guy, So what happened was in 2004, he decided that he was going to invest money into some machines. And I'm not going to talk about the machines because I think everybody already knows what they are. But anyway, so he said, go ahead and recall me. It's fine, So as people started leaving, which are called exit polls, they started tallying it up, and it looked as though 60% was against him and 40% was for him. So they were like, this guy's going to get recalled. In the middle of the night, all of a sudden, it goes the other way. So he wins by a landslide, 60% to 40%, the opposition.
It's almost like the switch.
The switch, yeah. And so everyone was, guys, this is fraud. And of course, the Carter Center, Jimmy Carter went down there. He was like, oh no, this is not fraud. He won fair and square, all this stuff. And it's like, no, he didn't. But
it is amazing when you think back how many countries Jimmy Carter helped to destroy.
My gosh.
We can name at least
Venezuela
two.
is definitely one of them. Iran is definitely the other.
So this guy, anyway.
So from that time, they have cheated in every election. Every single one.
So your point is, why did anyone even think for a moment?
For one moment.
That they would not have this in the bag before it even got started. And it's important to realize here that with Venezuela, unlike America, they've already taken over the court.
Right.
And it was to talk about the role of the Supreme Court in taking the leading candidate, Maria Corina, and throwing her off the ballot.
Right. Well, before even Maduro came in the picture, with Hugo Chavez hated Maria Corina. He tried to put her in jail and probably tried to take her out several times. But Maduro certainly hated her. And when she decided, you know what, I've had enough, the citizens of Venezuela have had enough, and all of the people, that 7 million Venezuelans have left Venezuela. 7 million, okay? 4 of them are here in America. Many of them, unfortunately, are not the kind of Venezuelans that we want in America. As you know, the last, year or so, we've had criminals.
The worst people pouring in.
The worst people. They really broke open their prisons and decided that all the criminals were going to come to America, and Maduro let it happen.
By the way, I love these. We see these quote fact-checking articles because Trump has been going around saying that the Venezuelan crime rate went down 67% because all these criminals are coming here. And then the fact checkers go, well, data is very hard to come by in Venezuela. We cannot corroborate the 67% number, not to mention that there are many reasons why the crime rate might have gone down or gone up. So more evidence of how they try to refute things that are obviously true, but nevertheless, this is the way they go about the refutation. So continue.
Absolutely. So anyway, as I was saying, Maria Corina, her mantra was not make Venezuela great again. It was bring Venezuela back from the grave. Okay, that's how
and bring
bad
the Venezuelans back
and bring the Venezuelans back to their home country to make it prosperous, because really Venezuela is dead. It's actually been dead and buried for 25 years. And so because of this, and she was getting this momentum. I mean, we helped her, you know. She was she would go from town to town to town, and just thousands of people would show up and cry that they wanted her to be the first woman president of Venezuela, and they were super excited. Well, of course, guess who wasn't excited? Maduro. And so what do you think he did to try to stop her from getting on the ballot in the first place? Because he saw the writing on the wall when people were like, this is who we want to lead Venezuela, right? So he goes to the Supreme Court, who was handpicked by him, Chavistas, Maduro supporters, loyalists, and so he goes, hey, how do we get her off the ballot? And so they were like, yeah, so for 15 years, Maria Corina cannot be on a ballot for 15 years, right? And of course, everyone knows that in 15 years, they'll do it again. So they'll never allow her to be on the ballot, right?
I mean, this gives us some insight in why the left here is so desperate to control the court.
Exactly.
The Supreme Court is a barrier to what they want. And
but also to that point, look at how they play this game. If they don't like the candidate, what do? They try to put them in jail. They
Sound familiar?
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. They try to get them out of the way. Let's not have to cheat, but let's get them out of the way. Let's do it this way first. And then if all else fails, then we'll cheat.
And it looks like all else did fail because even this other guy, Urrutia, whom no one really heard of before, he's like Maria Corina's handpicked surrogate.
Right.
He wins.
Yes, he wins by a lot. I think, and the way Maria Corina said it, probably by about 70%.
Think of it, 70-30.
70-30. But what happens is that they get rid of the evidence. And so they cannot tally these voting locations because they get rid of the actual votes. So they can't compare anything. So anyway, Maria Corina said that they were able to get at least 40%, and they were able to compare it to what he said. And it was like way off the charts,
So they got tallies from a certain segment of the population, but they couldn't get every area.
So then guess what Maduro does? So he goes, you know what? I'm going to have the Supreme Court
look into this.
Audit the election results. Yeah, right. The same Supreme Court that got her off the ballot. So everyone's like, really, dude? Are you kidding me?
I mean, you have to say that this is exactly, I mean, we wouldn't normally go into what's happening in Venezuela if it wasn't so eerily, not only reminiscent, but it points to where we're going. And these are exactly the fears that ordinary Americans have about what's happening here.
Yeah.
Right? When we talk to Laura Trump at the RNC, she's like, everywhere I go, this is the number one thing that people want to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the question raised by 2,000 mules.
Once you go down that road, it's really difficult to undo it.
It is.
And
people know that.
And people know it. And I've witnessed this for 25 years in a country that I love because I was born there. I have family there. It's very raw for me because every time I see people say, oh, yeah, this is it, we're going to do it, I know it's not going to happen. And why should we care here in America? Because that's always one of those things. It's like, Debbie, okay, you were born in Venezuela, so you care a lot about Venezuela. Why should we care about Venezuela? There's a lot of reasons, and we've talked about them. The fact that Iran, China, and Russia have a stronghold in Venezuela is one reason why we should care, because the foreign policy of that is extremely important for us.
Well, the other reason is that other tyrannical and totalitarian countries have a very different recipe. So, for example, China has a different recipe. The Chinese system is not coming to the United States. We're not going to become like North Korea, where you've got a short guy with really short hair, Kim Jong-un, running the country, and everyone worships him like a saint. But the Venezuelan model is one that we could see not only here, but in many other countries around the world. So it is, in fact, a very dangerous and destructive recipe.
Yeah. The parallels
are
eerie.
obvious and eerie.
Yeah.
When we left off yesterday, Booker T. Washington was talking about the pernicious influence of the Ku Klux Klan in the South in the latter part of the 19th century. And then he says, quote, "I have referred to this unpleasant part of the history of the South simply for the purpose of calling attention to the great change that has taken place since the days of the Ku Klux." He says, "Today, there are no such organizations in the South, and the fact that such ever existed is almost forgotten by both races. There are few places in the South now where public sentiment would permit such organizations to exist." Now, here we have a very poignant snapshot of history, a almost, you could say, moment when it appeared like the country would be moving in a completely different direction in the aftermath of the Civil War. So sort of 30 years after the Civil War, 35 years, Booker T is hopeful that there won't be any more a Ku Klux Klan, there won't be any more lynchings, there won't be any more of the kind of racial terrorism that you saw in the bitter aftermath, the immediate aftermath of the war. Now, he turns out to be wrong, but not because there was some spontaneous upsurge in the South. In fact, when the revival of the Klan came in the aftermath of the progressive president, Democrat Woodrow Wilson, showing Birth of a Nation, the movie in the White House, the Klan revival was not limited to the South. It actually was nationwide. It happened in the Midwest. It happened in the West. So unfortunately, Booker T. Washington's hope for the South becomes frustrated. And of course, he's there to see it, so that this occurs in the second and third decades of the 20th century, and Booker T. Washington recognizes that the hopes that he had when he first published Up From Slavery are dashed. Now, Booker T. we're now into chapter 5, and he starts by offering some thoughts about education. And they're pretty fascinating because they show an emerging difference of opinion between two of the most prominent black figures in the country at the time, Booker T. Washington, and then what will later become his rival, W.E.B. Du Bois. Now, Du Bois is a Northerner. He is descended from free blacks. He's not descended from slaves. Or at least if he is, these are slaves who obtained their freedom a long time ago. So he's raised as a free black man in New England. And he becomes the first black man, the first African-American to get a PhD at Harvard. This is a very pompous individual. He's lived in Europe. He is somebody who at one time in his life goes around with a monocle. So he's a man with airs. He's typically seen in photographs in like a three-piece suit. So think about it. This is a guy who could not be more far removed from ordinary people, and certainly from ordinary black people in the South, where the majority of black people live. And it's a sharp contrast, his life, with that of Booker T. Washington. W.E.B. Du Bois is the type of guy who speaks with words like thee and thou. One of his famous lines goes something like, "I stand with Shakespeare and I wince not." Now, you'd never hear Booker T. Washington talk that way. In fact, even when you read Up From Slavery, there's a certain type of almost ancient simplicity to the language, in which very powerful things are said, but they're not said using ornate or big words. There's very little rhetorical embellishment. And it's not because Booker T. Washington at this time doesn't know any big words. He is very well educated. He would be fully capable of speaking like Du Bois if he had wanted to, but he doesn't want to. And he has a reason for it. It's not just a matter of being of politic or that he wants to relate to ordinary people. He has a philosophy of education behind the way that he talks and writes. And we're going to get an early glimpse into what that is. So he says, during the whole of the Reconstruction period, two ideas were constantly agitating the minds of the colored people, or at least the minds of a large part of the race. One was the desire to hold office, and the other was the craze for Greek and Latin learning. Now, there's a slight element of humor to all this. Booker T. Washington downplays the humor. He gives it to us sort of, I won't say Laurel and Hardy style, but he's Laurel. In other words, he gives it like he plays the straight man here, and it's rhetorically very effective. First of all, he has a couple of caveats or qualifications. He goes, look, it could not have been expected that a people who had spent generations in slavery could at first form any proper conception of what an education meant. So he goes, okay, what I'm about to say, people have a kind of a wrong, even a certain fanciful or silly idea of education. He goes, it's to be expected. We started out in slavery. We were not allowed to learn except, to learn the kind of work that we're expected to do on the plantation. So he goes, if we have some wild ideas or some of our people had some crazy ideas, that is to be expected. He says the ambition to secure an education was both praiseworthy and encouraging. Absolutely right. And then he says the idea, however, was too prevalent that as soon as one secured a little education, in some unexplainable way, he would be free from most of the hardships of the world and at any rate could live without manual labor. So, what Booker T. Washington is saying here is that, look, it is true that the aspiration to education is a good thing. It is also true that education can help you to escape from a life of drudgery. In other words, you can learn to do tasks that involve skills, that involve knowledge, and that is not the same thing, for example, as standing with, a heavy object and breaking bricks or cutting trees. That's true. But, says Booker T. Washington, for a lot of these slaves, they're like, slavery was a lot of work. This is the good thing about me getting an education. I don't have to work, or at least I don't have to do any manual work at all, not even skilled manual work. Because remember, slaves did skilled manual work. There were slaves who were masons, who were carpenters, and so on, and developed agricultural techniques. And Booker T. Washington now wants to go against this idea that somehow because you have an education, you don't have to do anything with your arms and legs. You are now going to be sitting in a chair for the rest of your life. He recognizes that this is not really the way to go. He goes on to say, there was a further feeling that a knowledge, however little, of the Greek and Latin languages would make one a very superior human being, something bordering almost on the supernatural. So what he's getting at here is that you got some blacks who pick up some knowledge. And by the way, this is in no way limited to blacks. A few phrases of Latin and Greek, and suddenly they're like, I have seceded from the black race. I am now a superior human being. Every other black man has to bow down to me. Guess why? Because je ne sais quoi. Because I know a little Latin, I know a little French, I know a little Greek. And Booker T is like, this is wrong-headed. Not that there is no place. At no time does Booker T says, don't learn foreign languages. His point is that learn foreign languages in their place and in their time. First things first. Get a basic education, put it to use, make sure you can earn a livelihood, make sure that you have a way, as he himself puts it later in the book, figure out a way that you can live in a 2-story house. Let that be your aspiration. Now, once you've achieved those aspirations, then by all means, go to Paris. Start reading the poetry of the metaphysics, including John Donne. So in no way is Booker T. Washington against liberal education, but he is against liberal education for a guy who doesn't have an education at all. And this is where ultimately he will clash with W.E.B. Du Bois. Du Bois will caricature Booker T. Washington as if to say Booker T. Washington wants to keep the blacks in ignorance. He wants to keep them doing just menial tasks. Nothing could be further from the truth. Booker T. Washington is basically saying you have to walk before you learn to run. And this is something that Du Bois cannot even get his head around. Why? Because he takes so much for granted. Booker T. Washington had to learn to walk and then to run. Du Bois, in a sense, came from a family. He got a very good education at the outset. It never crossed his mind to dig a ditch in a field. He never did a day of manual labor really in his life. And so he looks with condescension and derision on Booker T. Washington, a condescension that is utterly misplaced.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.